Blessed be. I'm Elder Eliza from the Church of Light, and I want to talk to you about our sixth covenant, which is consent. Consent needs to be taught to children, and it's not just the responsibility of the parents, but also the church. Consent keeps children safe, and it's something that needs to be instilled in children and taught to children from a very young age. And it needs to be respected. Some neurodivergent children don't like being touched. And when they say no, that should be listened to. That should be respected. Children should be taught that they have the right to say no to being touched. And they need to be taught that when someone tells them no, that they can't just violate somebody's consent to do it. Violate their consent to touch them. This can help children from being abused, or when they are being abused, it can help the abuse stop sooner. When you teach a 3 or 4-year-old that when they say no, no means no. Yeah, okay, the overbearing aunt maybe wants to hug your child. But if your child doesn't want it, then they should have the right to say no. But when you get further on into adolescents and teenagers, boys need to be taught. Don't get me wrong, girls need it too. But boys, more than girls, need to be taught and reinforced about consent. No means no. There were a lot of jokes going around when I was growing up that no means yes and yes means something else. This is not how children should be taught. No means no, period. When consent is respected, that means boundaries can be set, and relationships, they can build healthy relationships. If boys aren't taught that no means no, then maybe a little alcohol will help change your mind. Lube the gears a little bit. And this is wrong. This is what results in women being raped. And this is not what we want, obviously. By children, adolescents, and teenagers constantly being reinforced that consent must be respected, that they are allowed the right to consent, and that at some ages that consent isn't possible. A 13 or 14-year-old in any state that I'm aware of cannot consent to sex. But kids that age are getting pregnant. Whether it was consensual or not, the law says they cannot consent to sex. And when a person, male, female, non-binary, doesn't matter, if they have imbibed in alcohol or any type of drug, illegal or not, they've had a few gummies in states that it's legal, that just took away their ability to consent. Had a few shots, that just took away their ability to consent. And both boys and girls, obviously non-binary is included in there as well, but anytime someone has something like this, they can no longer consent. And they need to know that they have the right to consent or not. You always, 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 always have the right to say no. You can withdraw your consent at any point in time. And this is how the Church of Light stands. When you get into things like kink, BDSM, whatever, you must consent. That's the whole reason behind safe words. And it's the whole reason why a lot of people say between two consenting adults. I don't care if you're into whatever. You always have the right to withdraw consent. I don't care if she's laying naked next to you. She still has the right to say no. At any point in time, she says no, it stops. That's what consent means. Consent means that with my permission, you may move forward. If at some point in time, I feel uncomfortable with what you're doing, I revoke my consent, and it stops. And children need to be taught this as young as 2 or 3 years old. They need to be taught that they have the right to say no. Again, the aunt that they very rarely see. To them, it may be a stranger because they don't have the same memories, the same memory structure that we do. So if the aunt wants a hug and the kid doesn't, they are not giving their consent. And I'm not talking about just sex. Children have the right to say no to hand holding, to hugs, to being touched, to having their clothing adjusted. Any type of touch, whether it's sexual or not, they have the right to say no. And this is something that we teach to the children in our church from a very young age. That you have the right to say no about anything regarding touch. If they go to the doctor and the doctor touches them in a way that they don't feel comfortable with, they still have the right to say no. Yes, I understand that kids don't like shots and they may not actually consent to having a shot. And this is something, talking about their vaccines or boosters, you need to take the time to explain to them the reason behind the vaccines. I don't care if it's saying, well, if you don't have your vaccine, you can't play football, or you can't play basketball, or you can't be on the swim team, or you can't even go to school with your friends. But give them the opportunity to consent to something like that. And in a community, if a neighbor or an uncle, a family friend, is touching a child inappropriately, that child has the right to say no, and they can tell their parents, hey, Uncle Joe, I told him no, and he didn't listen. Well, what did Uncle Joe do? Uncle Joe tried touching me here. This allows that child to be heard and maybe help that child from having a lifetime of trauma because of it. It happens, trust me. I know. I'm Elder Eliza with the Church of Light. Blessed be.